Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today I am catching up with my friend Felipe Lopez from Joe Architect, an expert in the evolving field of architectural design. It's time for a refresh as we dive into the latest changes and trends shaping office spaces today. We'll explore how technology is revolutionizing design, the new challenges in building and designing spaces, and what you need to know if you're considering working with a firm like Joe Architect. Let's get started. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch. Are you feeling the squeeze from declining starts and cash flow as costs continue to rise? Building on their industry-leading patient acquisition, insurance management, and collections solution, Orthofy is delivering groundbreaking innovations to keep your practice thriving. Orthofy's latest feature, IMAX, allows you to maximize every insurance claim submission, adding tens of thousands of dollars to your annual production. Plus, with the game-changing combo of FPT10 and third-party financing, Orthofy is making it even easier for patients to say yes to treatment while ensuring steady cash flow for your practice. Orthofy's commitment to your success in today's evolving orthodontic landscape is why I recommend them to my clients, and right now is the best time to get started. Visit startmoresmiles.com and use promo code HeyDocs to get 50% off your implementation. Felipe, I am so excited to have you back on. How have you been?
Hey, Jill. Great. Thanks for having me. Things have been great. How you doing?
Good. Us in our startup world, it's a good place to be for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I know we got lots to talk about with startups and dental ortho build outs. Always love chatting with you and just sharing whatever I can.
Absolutely. To get some of the formalities out of the way, in case somebody has not listened to one of our episodes, would you mind just for the audience telling everybody who you are and a little bit about Joe Architect?
My name's Felipe. I'm one of the project architects and managers at Joe Architect. We're located in Denver, Colorado, but we work all over the country. We do a bunch of work in Canada too, so I'm really everywhere. We specialize in boutique healthcare with definitely a focus on dental. So we're a full services architecture and interior design firm. So we're the one-stop shop when it comes to the design work for it. So yeah, if you guys need help with design for your office or practice, whether it's a startup, working with Jill, or you're established and looking for your second, third spot, definitely give us a call and we'll love to help however we can.
Yeah. And you guys are so great about that. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of startups and a lot of doctors who are in the position to be doing their own practices. I say this all the time. Anybody who's heard me say this before, if you want a white glove experience, Joe Architect is going to be the company to do that for you. And so I really appreciate what you guys do for us and how easy you make it for the docs out there, especially the ones doing their first practice. There's a lot that goes into that.
A lot of nerves, a lot of anxiety, but I think also when they partner with you, there's a lot of success because you point them in the right direction. We do try to make it as painless as possible. Believe it or not, it can be fun sometimes too, especially when we're presenting designs and definitely when you see the office being built. Love working with you, helping whatever doctors we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump into it. I know we've got a lot to get through today. I appreciate you being back on the show. One of the things I would like to do is talk about some of the changes we're seeing. You guys have just got such a good pulse on what we're seeing, what we're doing with how many practices you do throughout the year. If we can start by talking about some of the changes in layouts, architecture, some of those different things within our industry right now.
Sure. I don't have to really explain this, but COVID changed quite a bit forever. The dental build outs, dental design, office design was definitely impacted as well. We can get into the details here in a bit, talking about design trends and things of that nature, but just holistically, I think architecture itself with dental build outs hasn't changed that much in the sense that you still need to hire an architect to help you through this process to design the office, put together a set of drawings, deal with the city, the building department. In that sense, the process has been the same. However, when you're talking about specific things like design trends and layouts, we have seen some changes. So a quick example of this, it goes hand in hand. It's a design trend and a layout change. The most critical one I've seen is the social media space and wall, which I probably don't have to explain all too much, but I will to the rest of the listeners. That is definitely something a lot of our doctors are asking about. And if they don't, we bring it up and then they're like, of course I need this in my space. So before COVID, really, I feel like this was more of an afterthought. And it was really, I'm just going to take a photo for Instagram, for example, of one of my patients, and the backdrop will just be a nice area in my office. Let's say the brushing station, because there's decorative tile or something, or behind your logo, or what have you. And that used to be the norm. We found that since COVID and since social media especially has just taken storm, everyone's being more intentional about this. And it starts with the layout, because the last thing you want to do is have your office fully designed and then you bring it up, oh, where's my social media space? And you're like, it's that brushing station over there. That's not the answer you want to give. You want to be intentional about it. So we make a point to also bring this up to our doctors who have no idea how important this is, because we've seen from a marketing standpoint and a branding standpoint for the doctors, how important it is for them to have an area. There's no right or wrong. It's entirely up to you what you want to do with this space. Typically, it's out in the open, but it's an area that's highly visible, but it's just used for this. You don't want to have to wait for people to leave to then take the photos. Recently, we completed an office in Southern California where the doctor wanted a disco ball. She really knew what she wanted to do with that space, and we did it. The interior designer learned a lot about how to get the lighting all to work with the disco balls and things like that. So it's always fun, but whether it's a wall covering with your logo, a high design area with some sort of design feature, whatever it is, that's definitely one of the moves we've seen impacting layouts.
I love that you're bringing that up because I'm seeing a lot of that as well when I'm talking with doctors. There are different things that we're focusing on. They're still the basics of what we have to have in our office, but and I know you and I could really break down some of the differences also on top of that, or change where we aren't necessarily putting in extra business offices where we used to and some of those different things. I think that just leads into what you were just talking about, design trends. And I'm wondering, what are some of the other design trends that you guys are really seeing, what docs are asking for, or just the changes? You and I have been doing this for a while. What we used to do to what's being done now,
it's
or
much
for
different.
the future.
Yeah, I started working at this firm 12 years ago, so I've seen the evolution of office design with regards to dental for sure. Recently, we're seeing a huge trend in arched openings, having cabinetry be a little bit more rounded, softer edges. And I think the reasoning behind this is there's an impact from social media. Everyone's seeing homes, restaurants, and they're seeing these design elements. It evokes different things for different people. Like arches, for example, with it being more curved in nature, it just has a less rectilinear feel, which to a lot of people, they equate to it being a little bit more welcoming, a little bit more inviting. And so we've seen a lot of doctors gravitate towards that, which has been fun. Now, that this does not implicate the layout in a sense of what I was seeing when I first started, which was let's curve the floor plan, have hallways be curved and walls be curved. Now, some doctors want that, and that's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm more talking about it in the vertical aspect, like an arch opening or making a hallway and the whole hallway is arched. It can really create a fun, different way of creating entrances and thresholds. So that's definitely something we've been seeing quite a bit of. The other one is more of a finish selection. This goes hand in hand with the arches. It's more about Venetian plaster, where there's a texture or
I know
a
exactly.
layering to it
Yep.
that's subtle. We've been having a lot of doctors asking about this. They're interested about this. And again, I think the reasoning, just like with the arches, is doctors are interested in how do they make their offices feel less clinical, more inviting, more welcoming. They're seeing these things on social media. We're seeing a design trend with that as well, with finishes. Lots of black finishes, lots of satin brass. Doctors are no longer really interested in polished chrome, it seems. I'm sure we'll have this podcast in 10 years and it'll come back. That's how this works. It always comes back. But right now it seems to be more of these dressier finishes, even though these are small details, whether it's a faucet or cabinetry pulls. Doctors are more interested in these details because it's in the details where you start evoking the kind of sentiment and reaction that you want from patients when they're in the experience. Exactly. Like 12 years ago on a cabinet, if we just had a wire pull, those very generic day-to-day 50-cent chrome pulls, that was normal. But now if I were to suggest that to one of them, they'd be like, what is this? Where did you find this?
So retro.
We love finding, look at this. We're even looking at knobs now. Like before that was not really a thing. And now doctors are more interested in more of these decorative hardware. So it's very much in the details that we're seeing design trends leading towards. I think that has to do with more sophistication with the doctors knowing that these things are out there because they've seen them. So for sure, we've been seeing more of a trend with those kind of things, as well as when I use the term barn doors, I have to be careful because I use the word slider now, sends the different message, because when I say barn door, you immediately think of an actual barn door with the surface mounted hardware. A lot of doctors are like, oh no, that was like 2015. But what I'm talking about is actually they're coming up with a lot of hardware that's concealed up in the ceiling. It allows doors to just slide. They look great, but from a functional standpoint, we're seeing more of these doors because the rooms could be a little smaller. The door clearances are a little less. So that's one of the cheats that we use to make rooms feel bigger, even though they're a little smaller, and have the cabinetry in there be able to be a little bit bigger and things like that. So those are some of the quick design trends I've been seeing the last year.
I love that. It's so interesting. I've been doing this for 18 years now, and what I'm seeing with startups, and I can understand what you're saying. What we were doing 18 years ago in our startup designs to where we're at now is, and we see that it's just like in houses. Trends come and go. You know,
and they'll always come back.
Just hold on. I think it's been really interesting too. And I know you didn't really touch much on this, but I'm seeing a lot of docs that are going back into wall coverings again. I feel that has been, I haven't seen that in years and years. And now, boom,
it's back. But I've got to tell you, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. So again, you can have a lot of fun. It's like art. There's a lot of different options. We'll say wall coverings. A lot of people say wallpaper. It's the same thing, only now it's not really paper. It's more of a fabric that gets adhered to the wall, which is nice because it's more durable. But there's so many options now. We do find that is a really good way of getting texture on the wall or graphic, and not just relying on paint, like paint or art, because a lot of doctors are like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing art-wise. And so that's a nice way to set the tone and the atmosphere that you're going for sure. So wall covering's a big one. Now, layout-wise, there is one trend that I think it's important for doctors to know of, or at least be aware of, because this has changed, and I know you'll agree with me on this, the staff lounge. Back when I started, the staff lounge was basically, if we have room for one, great. but we are not spending any money in this room at all. If it's a broom closet with a microwave in it, that's what it is. I've seen a change, but I think the change is a good one. With doctors being more, they care more about their team and the people they're working with, especially if they don't have that team yet. What I have heard recently since COVID is how difficult it's been to retain staff, to find staff, depending on where you're at. I think doctors are a little sensitive on this. What are things that I can do to make them happier? And this is a small thing, but I think it's a real thing, giving them a space. Because I talked to a lot of doctors who have had offices that are 10, 15, 20 years old, and they're like, yeah, we don't have a staff lounge. We close the office and we eat in the waiting room sometimes. There's all sorts of things that are wrong there. I'm seeing a trend with that. Now, sometimes you have enough space, you have enough capital to allow for this. Sometimes you don't, but I'm definitely seeing a trend with doctors being at least more open to it, and they're bringing it up rather than us bringing it up as to, let's dress it up a little bit. It doesn't need to be over the top, but let's make it an enjoyable space for them, which I think could be important.
I agree with you, especially with startup doctors. We have to put money into the areas where we're going to make money, but you are going to have a place where you need to have team meetings. You are going to have a place where you want your team to be able to go and disconnect for their half hour or their hour. If you can afford more than a broom closet for them, they're going to appreciate it.
Whereas I think in the past, it was like, no, I want the broom closet.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a big one. Another one that I've noticed recently are how doctors are taking photographs.
If they
Not
are
social
taking
media.
if they are taking photographs even.
I've had a few doctors, they're like, oh, where's my photo studio? We always have to clarify, what are you doing? Like how are you doing it? Some doctors, I'm not a camera guy, but I can tell you they're not doing it with their iPhone. It's
Yeah, the big deal.
the big ones.
Yep.
And so they'll have their soft boxes and things like that. Not every doctor is into this, but I'm seeing more doctors talk about this. If this is something that's important to you for one reason or another, definitely make sure it's not an afterthought, because we need a plan for this during the layout design.
Let's talk about technology. We both know technology is just in here and here, but I do think that it is affecting even how we're designing offices and the way we're thinking about, from wet labs to dry labs to where we're doing our scans. We're just having to think about everything very differently. And I'm wondering if you can talk about it from the architectural side, what you guys are seeing when docs are talking about, okay, we've got technology that we're wanting to utilize in the practice, and how does that affect the design of an office now?
You hit on a couple of points. I can talk about how it affects the actual practices. I can also talk about how it affects how we present info to doctors too, because technology is changing that too. So sticking with the practices though, from functional standpoint, I think the lab is a pretty big one. Like you were saying with the 3D printers, depending on your specialty, you still probably want a sink for a model trimmer, or at least a sink just in case, because who knows down the road. When 3D printers started getting more popular, we realized we need to make spaces flexible, because who knows what's going to happen in 5-10 years due to technology. You think technology would make things smaller and take up less countertop space. That's not always the case. We saw that with the 3D printers. So it's more about being open to flexibility, thinking in the future, okay, what should I plan for here? Given your constraints with space, if we're talking Southern California, the spaces are tiny as opposed to elsewhere in the country. Technology-wise, if that's affecting certain things, X-rays, for example, nomads, those walkable X-ray units, lots of doctors, that was not something they'd bring up regularly. And now it's, where am I housing them? Because I don't want them to tip over and that little disc thing break. Technology like that, I think every doctor, especially in ortho, they're like, where's my iTero going to live? Whereas before, those just used to just live in the open bay. It just needs an outlet. And now we're asking doctors, do you want to house them somewhere? Should we create a specific space so at the end of the day, they can charge there? That way they're just not floating around. So those are a few things that the technology from the dental equipment has impacted what we do. A lot of doctors used to ask for a dedicated check-in station, and now they're like, no. We've been seeing this with technology, even TVs, for example, where in the waiting room, that used to be like a no-brainer having a TV there. But now doctors are like, I'll have a TV there, but it'll be that Samsung Art TV where
Mm-hmm.
I could put marketing materials on it, because everyone's got their own devices now, right?
Yep.
So you're in the waiting room. If you have a TV with volume on it, I'm pretty sure the people at the desk are going crazy because now everyone's yelling at each other, right?
Yep.
So it's usually on mute, and usually everyone's using their own devices. So we're seeing less and less TVs and monitors from an entertainment standpoint, and less built-in things. If we're talking about a media bar at the waiting room, or even like pediatric, where it's like, oh, where are all my iPads going to live?
Yep.
It's okay. You don't want them drilled into the countertop, do you? Because in 2 years,
They may not.
that might not be a thing. And now all of a sudden you have holes through your quartz countertop. So we've definitely seen a change with how doctors are using these monitors and that kind of technology.
Yeah. I can agree with you, because having seen these changes, that is one of the things I talk a lot about with my doctors. I think what seems to be in right now is a place for somebody to sit down with their devices and work at a media counter. I think gone are the days where we're providing the components that people are going to work on. It's been a long time since I've actually had a doc put out iPads or any of those, for the very reason that everybody's coming in with their own devices. We just don't need that anymore. And I don't think most people would use them anymore.
We've seen a lot of that. To your point, when you're talking about media bars and different seating styles in the waiting room, we've definitely seen more of an interest of, hey, I don't want to just line my waiting room with chairs. How do I create spaces within this larger waiting room?
Mm-hmm.
Most doctors aren't telling us this. We're seeing that they're interested in this. We do our best to make these waiting rooms dynamic, and that can be different seating heights, like a media bar facing a wall, because now you've got a taller countertop with stools as opposed to shorter individual chairs or even sofas and things like that. So that definitely has been impacted by the use of technology too, I think.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the biggest obstacles you're seeing right now as far as when people are designing their spaces. And what are some of those big changes that you're seeing, or obstacles from how we were designing a couple of years ago?
So there's a couple of things I want to talk about with this, and the obstacles are less design related. They're a little bit more process related. This was always important, but this is more important now because it seems like more and more people are moving into, again, this is depending where you're at, but it's not just a single story retail building. Now, a lot of doctors are still moving into those types of buildings, but it just seems like more are moving into high rises and things like that, where the floor structure is going to be important. Who's below you? Who's above you? We're working on a couple projects right now where that floor structure is specific. It's called post-tension. There's cables through them. So you have to figure out where all these things are up front, because it'll impact where you can have your carts, sinks, or bathrooms. You definitely want to talk to an architect who's aware of these things up front, because you could have a beautiful layout, construction gets started, and then this gets brought up, and then, hey, lo and behold, you got to change a whole bunch of stuff late in the game. And so we're seeing, and I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, but we're definitely seeing more doctors moving into those type of buildings.
Yep.
Definitely getting an architect involved early on to make sure they're asking these questions. Again, none of these are like deal breakers, but you just want to know this stuff up front. The other is the actual leases. Now, I'm not going to dive way into this because I know you talk to brokers and you invite them to talk about this, so I'm sure they're talking more about this. But when I'm talking to a potential doctor, one of the first things I ask them is, if they're in lease negotiations, is when does your rent start?
Yes, so important.
Because we have a schedule, right?
Hey docs, on this podcast, I talk about a lot of different ways you can set your practice apart. But here's one that might surprise you. Maybe you haven't thought about it before, but the equipment you use can make a big difference, not just for the patient experience, but for you and your team too. That's why I want to let you know about a new line of orthodontic equipment from ADEC. I visited their headquarters in Oregon earlier this year to take a sneak peek for myself, and I have to say, I was impressed. ADEC has manufactured award-winning dental equipment for 60 plus years, and they're bringing that same level of excellence to ortho. From comfortable, compact patient chairs to a versatile workstation and delivery to ergonomic dental stools, ADEC orthodontic equipment is designed for a smooth and easy workflow. Day after day, patient after patient, see the difference it can make for your practice. Click the link in our show notes to learn more about ADEC Orthodontic Solutions. Hey docs, let's talk about SmileSuite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud SmileSuite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. SmileSuite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with SmileSuite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
This whole thing is a process. You've got design and engineering, which takes a certain amount of time. You've got permitting, which takes another amount of time, and then construction, which takes time. If a doctor isn't even talking about rent and they're like, oh, I have no idea, probably 6 months after I signed the lease, then I have to be the one telling them, like, look, this normally takes longer.
Yep.
And there's too many variables to pinpoint how long it'll take, but it just takes a little bit longer. And so I always try to make sure that they're aware of this, to get as much time as they can. Those are a few obstacles that we've been seeing more doctors facing now. The other one you and I were talking about was whether they're leasing or purchasing. Typically, you're getting that financed through a lender. And if you're not, then you're doing really well.
Right.
But let's say you're like most people and you're getting that financed. Most lenders will pre-approve you, and then they'll have a set of deliverables you'll need to provide before they can close on the loan. When I talk to doctors about this, it always sounds backwards to them, and I agree, but this is just the way it is with most lenders. They need to have pricing for your project before they can close on the loan. And then most doctors are like, how does that work? Does that mean you guys have to do all your work? And then let's just say that takes 2 months, 3 months, fully designing and engineering the space, having a full set of construction drawings, having the contractor price it out. They're only giving me 45 days to do all of this. How do we do this? And so most lenders are aware that in order to get actual pricing, it just takes longer.
Yeah.
So most of them are okay with having an architect develop the floor plan, your layout, and then you have to have a contractor on board to provide preliminary pricing. And they're usually pretty good, but definitely you need to be working with a contractor who has done dental before. Definitely not residential, and that if that's their bread and butter, they're not going to know how to price this to begin with. But someone with dental experience, they'll provide a detailed breakdown, and then you can then provide that to the lender. They can close on the loan. Now, here's where the obstacle comes into play. A lot of doctors are like, hey, I want you to pause before I know that I'm getting this money. I don't want you to move forward. So that's an obstacle in the sense that we're pausing the project until you get financing through, but we've already started the process. So it's not great because most doctors get excited and they're like, no, I want you to keep going. But there's a level of risk that's involved if you keep going. So those are a few obstacles that we've been seeing. The biggest one by far is just construction costs. Everything's more expensive now than it was 5 years ago. It's And if someone's telling you different, then I don't know where they're living, but it's not here.
And I agree with you 100%. Working with doctors across the United States, as you guys do as well, and also into Canada, it is so different. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things that I have when I see doctors who are talking in these Facebook groups. Somebody's, oh, it's ridiculous that you're paying that much for a build out now, or you're totally getting taken advantage of, or this or that. I want to say to all the docs that are listening, this is where we're at. You guys aren't being taken advantage of. It's just where we're at. The pricing that anybody who built out pre-COVID is completely different. And so I'm wondering I think that just segues into talking about costs and a bid process versus a negotiated process and what that looks like now. Because again, I think there's a lot of docs that they really want to help our newer docs and give good advice, but they're just really out of touch with what it is. And it's not that.
Because things have changed.
Yes.
They've
And
changed.
Exactly. So can you talk to what you're seeing there?
Definitely. I'd say pre-COVID, 9 out of 10 jobs or doctors were interested in a competitive bid, which means let's have 3 or 4 contractors on board. They'll price the project. This is when you have a full set of drawings. You get everyone's pricing. Hopefully you're reviewing it with an architect or a consultant, and then you pick who you want to work with. Most doctors like that approach because there's still the stigma of if you're working with one contractor, they're going to screw you over because there's no competition. I know for firsthand, if you're working with Jill, you only recommend contractors that you have experience with, ones that are reliable. Same here. Never gonna point them into a direction of a contractor that we don't feel certain can deliver and is honest.
Yeah.
So historically, like I said, that competitive bid was more interesting for doctors. They're more intrigued about it because they felt like they're able to shop for who they want to use. Now, we're seeing now is more of what we call a negotiated bid, which means you've got a contractor really on day one, like very early on in the process. You're going to work with that contractor and they're part of your team. Now, the reason we're seeing more of a trend with this is because a lot of doctors are more interested in getting that preliminary price before we're all done with the design, engineering, all of our drawings, because again, construction costs have fluctuated so much that a lot of doctors are like, I want to know what this is going to come in at before I'm way down the rabbit trail there and it's too late to turn back. And now I've got a set of drawings for an office I cannot afford.
Yep.
No one wins in that situation. So we really try to avoid that. So when we're talking to doctors who are very sensitive of their budget and what they're trying to go for, just because they have a certain budget, unfortunately doesn't mean that what they have in mind and what they're looking for aligns with that budget. So a lot of doctors are more interested in this approach now just because they can get pricing much earlier and then they understand what they're walking into and they can plan according. So that's why we've seen more of a trend with that. Now, I personally think that approach is great, but again, it depends on the contractor you're working with. If I don't know who that is, and neither do you, there's some risk involved there because we don't know if that preliminary price number is going to be accurate or not. So I'd really only suggest it if that contractor has a really good reputation or you're surrounded by people that have worked with them from a referral standpoint.
I think that's great advice. I'm seeing it a lot where if I have docs going out to get initial bids because they have decided that's what they want to do, a lot of times the contractors are just not even doing them, number one, or giving them such high bids because they're like, it's not worth my time to really put a lot of thought and effort into this because I may not get it anyways. And I've just found they're not hungry. It's the one trade that has not stopped through COVID.
No, it hasn't. So that's another thing we're seeing in a couple of areas with a competitive bid, 3 or 4 contractors. If it comes time to reach out to them and be like, okay, 3 different contractors, here are the drawings. Can we get pricing in 2 to 3 weeks? They could be like, no, I'm
Yep.
too busy right now. I'd love to do it. I just can't. So if that was the contractor you really wanted to work with and you sign them up early on when the project starts, you'll lock them in.
Mm.
If you do a competitive bid, it's possible you might not get the contractor you were hoping for because they might just be too busy at that point.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them are hungry right now. There's too much construction going on. Most of these contractors are not just doing dental, they're doing all sorts of other commercial things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree.
It's a tough thing. And I talk a lot about, I call it this gray area. And I'm going to just circle back to something you said in the very beginning about when is the right time to get going with these drawings, whether we're doing a purchase or doing a lease. And I always talk to my docs that there's this weird gray area where we're in lease negotiations and we haven't signed the lease yet, but we know we're only going to get maybe 60 days or 90 days of free rent. And there comes this point where we have to be moving forward with our drawings, because what I have seen lately is it seems like there's been a lot of docs, at least coming to me, and they're like, I'm ready to sign my lease. I'm ready to get going with help. And I'm like, have you done anything with design? Oh, no, I haven't done anything with design. And I'm like, okay,
we're already running out of time and we haven't started.
You have to be far enough along in that lease negotiation. I call it this volleying process, where we're in the LOI component, moving into lease negotiation, volleying back and forth between the lawyers. And if we feel like there's nothing big coming up, we really have to be getting our architects involved. It is risky, because
there is risk if the
Yeah.
lease falls through. I agree. Getting an architect involved before you sign the lease,
Yes.
as long as you're not like, I have no idea, it doesn't seem like this is going well from a lease negotiation standpoint.
Exactly.
Don't. But most doctors, they'll be working with a broker, they'll be working with you, Jill. And I think if you guys have a good sense that, look, we'll get there during negotiations, there's going to be back and forth, but I'm 90% confident this will go through. And get your team involved
Yes.
early. Get your architect involved in early. There's nothing worse than a doctor calling me and saying, "Hey, I signed my lease yesterday. I need you to start today." And if we can, we will. We don't have a 3-month wait list. We will make that happen. But if we could have started earlier to shave some of that free rent period, that would be even better. So I do highly suggest, if you sign us up, there's really no risk. We get you on our staffing schedule. We're aware of your project. Let's say if a doctor calls me, they haven't even signed us up, we like to help with due diligence. And that's just, hey, doctor, tell me whatever you have on your building, your
Those
draft
CAD
of the
drawings.
lease.
Yeah.
Let me take a look at it. My job is not to kill deals. My job is to be like, were you aware you don't have any HVAC?
Yeah, there's no fire suppression here.
Yeah, it's just pointing things out. So hopefully the broker is telling them this, and then they're negotiating for better tenant improvement allowance to cover these things. But those are things I like to bring up early on and just get my head wrapped around the project. That way, if you do need us to start, we can hit the ground running. And if you shave a month off of a project, that's huge.
Yeah.
There's risk, like you said, but I think you have to weigh that out, and usually the risk is worth it.
I want to talk about one more scenario that I'm seeing more of, and maybe we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but just talk to it a little bit. And that's when I've got doctors going into a space that has not been built yet. The lease requires that the landlord approve the design of the space before it's built. We have to get an architect involved to help us design out the space to get the approval from the landlord. But then the building isn't even built yet. I'm wondering if you can talk about that scenario, because I think that's always a tough one.
We run into that all the time. For one reason or another, a lot of our Texas projects are like that. And that's totally fine, because what happens is the building doesn't exist yet, but ideally there's going to be a building within a year. There has to be a set of drawings for the shell, what they're going to build, roof, exterior walls, what have you. As long as we have that set of drawings, we can do our work. The building does not need to exist, but usually that set of drawings has enough information for us to understand the parameters of where we're working, where are windows, where's the roof structure, What volume are we dealing with? How tall can we make your ceilings?
Mm-hmm.
Where's HVAC going to go? The ductwork. Just from those set of drawings, we can fully design an office. We've done it numerous times. It's not a problem. Now, what will usually happen is that when they build it, it's construction. So this column moved over a foot and no one decided to tell anyone about it.
Yep.
Things like, and that's drastic. Hopefully a column's not moving that much, but there might be little things here and there. That's okay. That's part of the process. Your architect should be able to then work with you, work with the contractor, come up with good workarounds.
Yeah.
Most of the work that we do as architects and interior designers is problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Those things will come up and we will deal with them as a team.
Yeah.
I'm never concerned when a doctor is moving into a building that doesn't exist yet. Nowadays, the set of drawings even has perspectives, views of what the building's going to look like from a client standpoint moving into that building, what you're already moving into.
Yeah, some benefits I've seen sometimes when we've got architects like yourself involved early is sometimes we can be like, hey, can we add an extra window or change our door front? A lot of times the landlord, the building is absolutely, that doesn't affect anything for us. Can we add an extra exterior door or this, that, or the other? I've seen that really work in the doctor's favor. They might not even know to ask if they didn't have a team to be like, hey, doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are definitely pros on moving into a building that doesn't exist yet.
As we start to wrap up here, this has been so good. I just love having you on. I'm wondering if you could maybe give us 3 pieces of advice for somebody looking to work with a company like yourself or work with you guys. What are 3 things that they need to be thinking about?
So I think the first thing would be clear about your intentions. Like, why are you reaching out to Joe Architect or another firm that does boutique, very intentional designs? If your ultimate goal is, hey, I just need an architect to draw me up a plan, I just need it done quick, I need it done cheap, then we're probably not the right fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
But the question should be, why aren't you looking at this in a different light? Why aren't you trying to be more intentional about your office design? So that's one piece of advice. It's important to know that what you're doing, this office build out, if you're leasing, you're going to be there for at least 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you're purchasing, longer. What kind of space do you want to be spending day to day? An office isn't just an office, it's part of your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're working with an architect that understands this like we do and intentionally designs your office in a way that works for you, works for your brand, helps reinforce your brand. And because we've seen a lot of success from doctors who have that mentality. So the advice would be just be clear. If that's what you want, then you should hire an architect that can help you with that. If that's not what you want, and you just want an office and that's all you care about, these other things don't matter to you, then find that right architect to help you. I think that's step one. I think the other one is be forthcoming about your budget. A lot of doctors get a little squeamish about sharing this with us, definitely with the contractors, and I get that. But with your architect, we need to understand just really what we're working with.
Yes.
That way we can design the office that meets your goals, your vision, and your budget, because that's the hard part. Getting all those things to align perfectly where you have the office of your dreams, you hit your budget, and you did it in a painless way with a team that just knocked it out of the park within your time frame. The budget is important because if you just don't have the right budget for what you're looking at doing, that's where expectations aren't being met. That's where we find a lot of heartache with, oh, I hired you guys, I thought this is the type of office that I was hoping for. And that's why we deal with this in our early conversations with doctors. We want to meet. We can still design very beautiful, elegant, sophisticated offices, but depending on your budget, we will tackle that design a specific way. Not one design fits all, because it depends on where you're at, what kind of building you're in, what kind of design are you more interested in? Is it more luxurious, lavish? Let's have nice materials everywhere. Is it cleaner, simpler? All those things impact cost.
Yeah.
So us knowing what to target, which leads me to my third point, which is managing your expectations through this process. Social media is the double-edged sword that we've been dealing with, where it's great because doctors have been much more clear nowadays about what they want, which helps us be able to craft their office with a clearer vision. They'll send us Pinterest photos or
Yep.
Instagram photos, and we're like, I like this, I like that. And we're like, okay, how do we create a concept from that and really help create your brand with this
Yep.
design? And that's great. However, on the other edge of that sword is they see all these brief snippets of these moments in these places, these offices, restaurants, hotels, and they want their entire office to be this one image. And that's not always
Mhm.
realistic. That might have been the only nice part in that one image of that office. The entire office wasn't designed like that,
Right.
but in their mind, they're like, these are the things that I want.
Yeah.
So it's managing expectations with regards to what can you afford, what makes sense this time around. Something that we do a lot is we'll design your entire office, and we have what's called deductive alternates on our drawings, which is a strategy. It's a list of items that we put on there of how do we bring the cost down.
Mm-hmm.
A simple one could be, let's just say your doctor's office. We designed all your cabinetry for your doctor's office. You wanted it really done up, and so we did that. Deductive alternate could be, let's take all that cabinetry out, and then you buy a furniture piece there.
Yep.
The nice thing is that furniture piece could be a placeholder, but it could be temporary. You get cash flow coming in, patients are growing, and a year down the road, you have the drawings for what that doctor's office should be cabinetry wise. You just call your contractor and be like, hey, it's time now. I'm ready for you to build the cabinetry that I wanted from day one, and then you can do it. So that's just one example of strategies you can work with an architect and contractor to help bring costs down. But that's managing an expectation that you're not going to get everything all on day one.
Yep.
I know you do it all the time with dental equipment.
Yes.
Hey, doctor, we have to plan for your 5 chairs and carts, right? And your open bay. We're planning for that for sure. All the utilities are going in on day one. That's not going to happen afterwards. But you're going to start with 3 of those chairs.
Exactly.
Because
yep.
that's all we can afford right
Yep.
now. And that's okay. But as long as you, as the doctor, understand that some things might not happen all on day one. So that would be another big thing, just managing your expectations of what the outcome could possibly be on your project.
I think great pieces of advice for sure there. And I just want to echo one of them about being really clear with your budget. I think one of the hardest things I see doctors go through is when they are not forthcoming with what the bank has approved them for. If we're doing a startup, we already know what the bank is allotting for how much we can spend and where we've only got so much money. And when I see a doc go through the design process, there's a lot of companies out there and they get to the end and they're so far over budget that by the time we can bring it back to budget, all of those design elements are gone. We're back to this very basic shell of an office. And it's so defeating. And talking about managing those expectations, this is the one area nobody likes to talk about money. And I know it's uncomfortable and you may be thinking, but I don't want to tell them that I've only got 500,000 or 600,000 or whatever your number is. But if you don't tell them, it's going to be even more disappointing and frustrating for everybody.
We take that seriously because it is so painful to go down that road when that happens. We do our best up front before the doctors even hire us.
Yeah.
We feel a responsibility of if this just isn't the right fit right now, because you've got something in mind, this kind of beautiful office with all these things, and your budget is saying elsewise, like what we try to do is still paint a clear picture of what this process will look like. At the end of the day, we want to help every doctor, even if it's a 1-hour phone call. They might have never gone through this process before. They have no idea what they're walking into. I will still take an hour of my time to explain exactly what this process looks like, even if I know within 5 minutes we're not going to be working with them.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Maybe not this time around, but when they're an established doctor 10 years down the road, they could be like, you know what? Now I do have the money to do what I want. I'm going to call Joe Architect to see how they can help me. It's less about, hey, I want your future business. It's more about, if I don't help you to be successful right now, there is no future business. It's really more just about helping others. In this industry, I don't have to tell you, Jill, everyone knows everyone. And so I make it a point to build relationships with everyone, even doctors that I know just it's not going to be a good fit this time around, because you try to help everyone that you can, however you can.
Yep.
The amount of times that we have to turn projects away because we're not the right fit, what I then try to do is at least point them in the right direction. Like, talk to Jill if you have a contractor on board, a dental vendor on board, reach out to them, see who they would recommend. Just try to give them guidance. If we're not going to be on the project, we still want it to be successful. Even if that's referring them to other people, other architects and interior designers, we do that all the time if we're not the right fit, because at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people.
Yes.
So you just got to do the right thing. Exactly.
Oh, that's great. So as we finish up, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, if they want to learn more about Joe Architect, what's the best way they're going to be able to do that?
I'd say hop on our website. It's just joearchitect.com. You can then reach out to us. Our contact info's on there. You can find us on social media. Lots of doctors are following us to get ideas, but it's at joestudio.com. Or again, even if you don't want to go on our website for whatever reason, look us up on Google, get our phone number, give us a call, and we'll give you a call back. It'll likely be me. Just chat about your project and see how we can help. But to your point, Jill, definitely call us before you think you need us. The amount of calls I've gotten from doctors who are embarrassed, they're like, I haven't even found a spot yet, but I'm going to be looking soon. A lot of times I'm like, are you working with a broker? And they're like, I didn't know I had to do that. And so I can point them in the right direction of work with them. Are you working with a consultant? Do you know what? I point them to you, point them to other people in the industry, depending on where they're at and what resources we have. So definitely call before you think you might be ready, but call us before you sign the lease. Yes, exactly.
This has been great. Thanks for such a good episode. And I know that there were a lot of people taking some good notes, and I'm sure you're going to be getting a lot of calls. So as we finish up here, you probably remember I like to finish up with a speed round. So are you ready for the speed round challenge?
Let's do it.
So our first speed round question, what is your go-to productivity tool?
I use Microsoft Planner and Microsoft To Do. We use Teams too, but the Planner and the To Do, that's the only way. I'm working on 5 to 10 projects at any given time, and all my kind of to-do lists organized, because there's so much that goes on in these projects. So that's just what I use.
I love it.
It used to be like 11 notebooks, one for each project, and I'd handwrite everything.
I was old school paper, and I still do to some extent. Sometimes I have to just physically write it, and then it goes into the computer.
I do it too. Yeah.
How about early bird or night owl?
So I'm neither.
I'm about midday.
I do know when I've had a good night's rest and when I wake up and I feel refreshed, I just smash the day. Now, my wife would like me to go to bed earlier so that can happen more regularly. I'm not a night owl, but I'm not one of those people that just wakes up at 4 a.m. and I'm like, yeah, let's start the day.
I think I'm right there with you. I definitely don't pop out of bed at 4 and be like, woohoo, let's go. Nope. How about, what was your first job?
My first job was actually at Cold Stone Creamery.
Oh, I was a Baskin Robbins girl.
Nice. We didn't have to sing the songs at the one I worked at, though.
Oh, good for you. All right. What would you say has had the most impact on your professional life?
I always go back to relationship building. And this ties into other things. I found that if I'm able to develop relationships with people that I'm working with, not just my team, the doctors I'm working with, you as the consultant, contractors, everyone I'm in touch with throughout this entire process, everyone's got different insight because everyone's dealing with their own piece of the puzzle, right? And I love to learn from everyone and build these relationships with them so I can learn even more, not just about what they're doing, but what can I do to help you with your process to make a better outcome for everything. Professionally, found that if you give time and to build these relationships, it can go a long way.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And then to finish it up, what's one business skill that you think everyone should have?
So that goes in hands with the building relationships thing, but I think being intentional about not just building relationships, but taking the time to talk to people. I found, and look, I'm not like old or anything like that, or at least I don't consider myself, but I've seen a trend where people are getting more used to writing emails and corresponding via text as opposed to calling. I can see us starting to forget how nice it is to get someone on the phone to wrap up what would have been 30 emails in a 2-minute call. There's certain things with email and written communication that can get misunderstood very easily and can create rifts. I find that holding on to this notion of rather than just emailing this, I'm gonna hop on a call. I'm just gonna call this person.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because 9 out of 10 times you'll get voicemail. But if you develop that relationship with whoever you're talking to, they will pick up, or at the very least call you back, and hopefully it doesn't go into your voicemail. But I found that is something for everyone, just not to forget. There's something important about communicating in that.
I love that. Felipe, it's been great as always having you on Hey Docs. Thanks
This
for
was
all
fun.
of the information, and I hope to have you on again.
Yeah, definitely whenever you want.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jill.
Bye.